Hi, everyone. This is Megan with a correction for this episode. One thing that we take very seriously here at Fix SLP is accuracy. We do not delete comments or content that we got wrong. Instead, we work to correct it, and so we can all learn from it. You can see a list of things that we've gotten wrong, and we keep that list curated at fixslp.com. In this particular episode, our guest refers to the University of Maryland having required the CCC in the past to graduate. She moves back and forth between present and past tense. And we want to clarify that the University of Maryland does not require the CCC to graduate from their programs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Berg.
And I'm Dr. Jeanette Benegas.
And we are here to fix SLP.
We are discussing the biggest challenges that are currently holding back the field of speech-language pathology.
We present the issues with facts and invite you to be part of joining our movement to make things better, one conversation at a time.
Let's fix SLP. Hi, Fearless Fixers. Welcome back. It's Jeanette. We have a really exciting episode today.
Woohoo!
Yeah, through some professional connections, we were introduced to Dr. Angela Levenbrook, who's been around the ASHA block a couple times, and she has a lot of things to say. So, we're going to jump right in with her, and then we'll get to some of our housekeeping stuff after. But we just want to share with you who she is. So, Megan, we don't usually do this, but Megan's going to go ahead and read her bio, and then we'll just jump right in. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to read it because it's a hell of a bio. There's a lot that this woman has done and continues to do. So, Dr. Angela Levenbrook was in private practice in Rockland County, New York from 1976 to 2020. She is the author of numerous articles, and along with Dr. Jane Madel, am I saying that right?
Madel,
Dr. Jane Madel, the first textbook about hearing aid dispensing for audiologists. Dr. Levenbrook received her doctorate in audiology from Teachers College, Columbia University. She was the director of the audiology clinic at Teachers College and associate professor in that program. She has served on numerous boards and committees for several state and national audiology organizations and served as president of both the New York State Speech, Hearing, and Language Association and the American Academy of Audiology. She served as the first chair for ACAE. She has been prominent in the development of standards and ethics for the audiology profession and in lobbying for direct access to professional audiology services for Medicare patients. Most recently, she has been awarded the honors of the profession by the American Academy of Audiology for her work on behalf of audiologists and individuals with hearing impairment. Earlier in her career, she also served on many committees for ASHA and also served on ASHA's board as vice president of standards. She became a fellow of ASHA. She was refused membership and accused of violating the ASHA Code of Ethics when she dropped her CCC in the early 2000s, and she has lived happily ever after since that time.
I just want to say that other than our hero and our unsung hero, Dale Bogus, this is like early Fearless Fixer right here. She was a Fearless Fixer before anyone was fixing anything.
Yeah.
Her and Dale Bogus, they were fixing.
Yep.
Welcome.
well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I am thrilled to see what's going on and what speech language pathologists are coming to see as part of the problem of their profession and of the professional association that represents them. I mean, audiologists have fought this battle for quite a while, and we're a small group. My own personal opinion is that audiologists have no business being in ASHA at all, because ASHA is an association for speech language pathologists, and audiologists are represented very well by other professional organizations. So, and I really thought with when the AUD became a requirement for audiology, that certificate would have less appeal. But it is so, ASHA has had its fingers and its tentacles in so many places for so many years, not the least of which is in academia, because that's where it all starts. People are indoctrinated in their academic programs from day one to believe that if they do not buy that certificate ad infinitum throughout their professional careers, that somehow their world will collapse. And ASHA has insinuated itself into so many regulations and laws and policies and procedures that it takes years to kind of unravel it all, to see where the problem originates and who believes, who was it that believed this lie about what that certificate actually represents. So you have a huge job ahead of you to unravel it all and to help people understand how that certificate gets in their way. To me, it always seemed like ASHA treated us like a bunch of Girl Scouts, you know, and we're still trying to get our badges. And that's it's infantilizing, I think.
Yeah.
Girl Scout leader here. That's exactly what it's like. I love that analogy.
Yeah, it is. It's
I have
like
a troop of 7-year-olds, and it's like herding cats and getting them their badge.
Their badge, correct. And that's what people are still doing, grown women. And I say women because that's mainly what who is represented in that organization. So it's a bunch of grown women still believing that they have to get these Girl Scout badges every year in order to be considered relevant and competent professionals.
And worthy, yeah. Can
And
you, like, so there's a lot of conversation happening right now that's like, but if we don't have the CCC, everything goes to hell. Like, there's no regulation. Anyone can do anything. There's no competency standards. There's nothing. We would have nothing. Like, why would you want to get rid of this thing that's holding this whole profession together? What would you say to that?
Let's break that down. The C's are not, the C's are nothing more than a continuing education certificate. That's all they are. The place where standards are important are in academic programs. I mean, it is, first of all, a professional organization, a major job of a professional organization is to define scope of practice and to define the knowledge, skills, and competencies that define a profession. So that's an important job that ASHA, and frankly, without ASHA, that job initially would not have been done. That organization and the volunteers, standards committees for years, ethics committees, they help define your profession and mine. I have a master's degree in SLP. So I was a practicing, licensed practicing speech pathologist for the early part of my career, and then got a doctorate in audiology and then stopped practicing speech language pathology. But ASHA did that work. There was no other organization to do it. And I, in the late 60s, that's when I first joined ASHA, mid 60s, late 60s.
And so that would have been right around the time that they introduced the CCC, right?
Exactly. That's the time when they were beginning to work on standards and they introduced that certificate. And at the time, there was no licensure. There was nothing that legally defined what an audiologist was and what a speech language pathologist was. So that work, that early work of ASHA's was critical because it did all that. It did, as an organization, it did an enormous amount of work in standards. And there was a massive study in the early 70s that was a knowledge, skills, competency thing. They hired the organization that runs, it's a standards organization and a testing organization. It still runs the Praxis test for ASHA. They hired them and did this massive study to define what skills do speech pathologists and audiologists have to have, what knowledge, what competencies, enormously important. And that work became the basis for licensure, which is the only legal It's the only legal definition. It is the only thing that legally defines and separates SLPs and audiologists from other people who might lay claim to part of our scope of practice. So ASHA initially opposed licensure tooth and nail. They did not want, and that was for me, that was the early sign that something was amiss in this organization, because it didn't see how critical licensure was to the success of both professions as legal entities that could compete in a world of other licensed healthcare professionals. So,
And just for historical context for people listening, it was 1969 and Florida was the first state to install a licensing board because they were seeing all these fake SLP practices, and ASHA had zero legal authority to shut them down. And they were like, we need some legal teeth here.
and
they
that's where
created this
licensure, and
licensing.
if you go back, I don't know if you can still find this in anywhere in ASHA land, but a lot of early writing and opposition, tooth and nail. And then they solved that problem by state inserting the Cs, not the standards for the Cs. Initially, the Cs were a group of standards that you needed in competencies that you needed in order to start out as a competent speech language pathologist.
Yeah.
And the other problem that SLP has, that audiology no longer has, is that the vast majority of your training programs are in academic, not professional schools. So audiologists, let's take PTs and OTs and physicians and dentists and chiropractors, they get their training in professional schools. So the school is responsible for everything. They're responsible for the coursework. They're responsible for the internships and the clinical training. All of that is part of the degree. Speech language pathology, that's not the case anymore. It is the case now for audiology because we have a doctorate. So our academic programs are responsible for that final fourth year where people are out getting their clinical experience. That's arranged by the schools. Master's degrees in speech pathology, all the school is responsible for is whatever you get in those 2 years, minimum number of hours. The vast majority of your clinical hours are obtained outside of the aegis of the academic program. They're done with you once you get your master's degree. They're done. And then the onus is on the student, the graduate, to go find the CFY year and get supervised and all that business. So you can't just say, for an audiologist, you can say an AUD is all you need to get a license because all your clinical work is done then. Not true for the
Yep.
Getting a master's degree doesn't
And
finish.
can we talk about like how that's affecting consumers? Like, why is that okay with us? Why are we okay with getting
Well,
a job
it has
when we're
to
not
be
even
that-
fully?
It has
We
to
would never want our doctor getting their clinical hours practicing on us in their first 9 months of cutting, right? Like, how's this
but,
okay?
OTs and PTs, for years, they were an MA field, right? They still, I think PT now, require a PhD and a doctor, a DPT?
DPT?
It's not a PhD, it's a DPT.
It's a
Yeah,
professional degree, like
Yeah.
like the AUD is a professional degree.
Yes.
PhD is a research degree. And for years, people who wanted doctorates in audiology, the only one they could get was this academic degree. It wasn't a practical degree. I don't have an AUD. I'm too old. I mean, I was done. I'm old, I'm 80. This is my 80th year. So I've been around a long, long time. And so that is a problem for SLP. That's one of your problems. The other major problem, I think, that you have in trying to really change ASHA and how it behaves about this certificate is the fact that I think I'm right. I think about 80% of the SLP members of ASHA are public school speech pathologists. And is that correct?
I can look it up real quick while you're talking.
I think that it is. And the fact that the vast majority of ASHA SLP members practice within a school setting complicates your goal, because in an educational setting, lots of people do the things that SLPs do. Teachers of the hearing impaired, teachers of the deaf, special ed teachers. I can't remember. There's a whole list of people.
I'll give you one that they're really, really, really having problems with now that one of our fixers added us to a page and I've just been like in the rabbit hole. Our ABA practitioners, big problem there that
Yeah,
they're
because
even writing goals for SLPAs to treat by. So it's, yeah.
And what is that? Those are the ABAs are the people who work with a lot of autistic kids and those kinds of kids, right? Yeah. So lots of people claim to do what SLPs have as their scope of practice. And the vast majority of them are done in the public schools, where I understand now licensure is required in more public schools settings, and SLPs are like, audiologists are often contract hires in public school settings. They're not in the educational thing. But SLPs are often hired as they have to fit in as teachers. That's why they're called a lot of times teachers of the speech impaired or teachers of the communication, whatever word they're given. But not only do they have to keep up with these SLP requirements, but the whole educational system, they have other metrics for deciding when you get a raise and when you're in a different hierarchy in terms of your salary and stuff like that. So in order to herd that group, that huge group of its membership, ASHA has worked really hard to insert that CCC requirement into every certificate, every educational requirement that teachers have to maintain their certification, to continue to get raises and salary upgrades and whatever promotions in the public school setting. And that is, I believe, what ASHA is the most terrified about. They are the most terrified of losing their hold on that public school group, which has the least reason to be loyal to ASHA. So, if you're in a hospital setting, or if you're in a private practice, or if you're in other clinic, you're defined by your licensure. If you're in a healthcare setting, you're defined by your licensure, not by your certificate. And lots of people worked really hard on licensure laws to change them so that CCCs were not required to get your license. Almost all of them, I think every single one of them, says the CCC or the equivalent.
Right.
There's one recently that requires the CCC.
And that could be challenged legally.
Yeah.
Because they're requiring you to buy a proprietary private certificate that the state has no control over.
Exactly.
Megan, it's Nevada, right?
Nevada, yeah. And I just want to hop in and clarify.
Nevada, do you hear that? I'm putting my hand up by my face, but none of you can see me like I'm making an announcement. Do you hear that? Get in, Humble. Did you hear what she said? That can be challenged legally because they are requiring you to purchase a private product to practice in your state. Go get them. Speak up. I woke up at 9 a.m. raging on Facebook about someone else's problem. So now we're going to take it out here. Go get them. Okay. Go get them. Meet us in Humble. We're there.
The key thing is you don't want to go to the state legislation and be like, we don't want to buy this product. You want to go to the state legislation and be like, you are putting yourself in a horrible situation. You are required, you're leaning on this certification product that is entirely out of your control, that this company could change at any time.
And that is unmonitored.
Megan, can I propose here? Is this where appropriate use of cease and desist letters could be implemented, where you're just going to tell them to stop? Is that how an SLP could appropriately use one?
Did they just change that law in Nevada?
They did. Somebody
Last couple
proposed
years.
that change. ASHA supported it and it went through. I do, before we get too much deeper into this, I do want to clarify that school SLPs make up, according to ASHA's member affiliate profile from 2022, they make up 50.3% of the body. And I think that's probably changed a lot in the last 20 years as dysphagia has grown. But I
Okay.
do think it's very, very weird that we have ASHA trying to sell a certification. We have licensing bodies, which is the gold standard for all other professions. And then we also have departments of education selling their own certifications. And then you get these school SLPs who are
That, I'll
stuck
tell you,
into
that's
all
an
these
interesting,
buckets.
that's an interesting statistic, that 50%, because I know that that's less than it used to be. But if you
Yeah.
take a look at, do you know about SOC codes, standard occupational codes? Okay, that's an interesting place for you to go look, because the Department of Labor defines and codes every single profession that there is. And it's via these standard occupational codes. And audiologists had a huge battle with ASHA over where we were placed in those SOC codes. Years ago, and if you wanted to find audiologists in that occupational code list, you had to look under speech language. There was no place for audiology. You had to look under speech language pathology, and then it was down underneath there. And speech language pathologists are listed as therapists, and audiologists consider themselves diagnostic and treating professionals. So the codes have been redone. Carol Flexer, one of the presidents of ASHA, of AAA, was the first to notice that we were in the wrong place there, and started AAA's advocacy efforts to get us changed. But if you look at, it's a wealth of information. If you look at the SOC code for speech language pathology, there are charts there that tell you where the vast majority of SLPs, people who call themselves SLPs, where they are employed, and 80% of them are employed in public schools. So it gives their average hourly rate. You can get an enormous amount of information. But as a result of the work of audiologists, speech language pathologists position in that standard occupational code list. It's what employers use to decide which are equivalent professions. They define the professions. It's a standard coding system for every single profession in the country. So take a look at that. It's under the Department of Labor. But if you Google SOC codes, I think I might have sent you a link earlier today, because I thought you'd find it interesting. But believe me when I tell you that the public school membership of ASHA is a critical membership group to it, because it's still the largest group. So 50% of them are speech pathologists, and then, how many are in much smaller numbers are in hospital settings, and probably in every other setting, licensure is 100% of the time the legal requirement. And most licensure laws allow for other methods of maintaining your license. Lots of places where I've read ASHA, and ASHA is responsible for this. They say, well, yes, you get your degree and your license, and then some people go on to earn the CCC, as if earning the CCC is some higher requirement than licensure, and it isn't. It's the same exact thing.
In some cases, it's harder to get the license.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question. I've been sitting here processing. I'm still on this rampage about suing in Nevada. I want to ask a question, and I'll see what you think. There are some insurance companies like Medicaid in 11 states. And then we found out yesterday, very few number, small handful of private healthcare insurance companies that require the CCC. Is that also something that could be challenged legally?
Absolutely, because they somehow have been led to believe that that is sort of like board certification.
Okay, because we're trying to develop the sustaining partnership program where we maybe hire a law firm, and people are asking, well, what are they going to look at? I think this is a very good first step. Megan and I had no prior information. So this
Here's
is just
why-
spitballing. But
here's
this
why.
might be something we have a law firm with attorneys nationwide that they look at.
Because AAA, again, had a law passed that required Medicaid to stop using the Cs as a requirement for audiologists. And we won that. So the Medicaid definition of audiologists does not specify the Cs. Still does for speech language pathology. Why? Because in the public schools, where you sometimes have unlicensed SLPs, they don't have to have a license, but they're SLPs, they're billing Medicaid. So in those states where licensure doesn't cover SLPs, Medicaid has that, they wanted that requirement in there for some credential.
So, sorry, can we talk about this? Because my understanding is Medicare is federal regulation, and in Medicare, the CCC is not required, but you're talking about Medicaid.
Yes, but
And yours-
Medicaid is covered by the same federal law as Medicare is, Medicare and Medicaid.
So when
And
I emailed, oh, go
I'll
ahead.
just- Medicaid is a state-run program. So there are certain, the federal Medicaid law requires a certain number of services that must be included in every Medicaid law on the state level. But the states don't have, they can choose to provide other things. They don't have to. And they can set up their own requirements in a lot of instances. So SLP is a problem for them because SLPs in the public schools are billing Medicaid for some of those services for Medicaid eligible children. But in some states, licensure is not required for SLPs in the public school. They're teachers of the speech impaired.
It's such a mess.
It is a mess.
It's such a mess. So when I talked to CMS, I specifically asked them, I was like, I understand that the federal regulation does not require the CCC, but if a state has a regulation, does that supersede federal regulation? And they said yes.
See, and that didn't used to be the case. So they said
Yeah.
if a state adds a regulation that supersedes the federal one?
Yeah, so their commentary was basically, and I can pull up exactly what they said. So I requested assistance from our Medicaid staff. They indicated that there are no known federal requirements for certificate of clinical competency, only state licensure. We believe this is best answered by the state Medicaid provider regarding what they are referencing with that statement of certificate of clinical competency. States can have more stringent requirements than the federal statutes. In addition, providers are required to follow all applicable federal, state, and local laws. Providers are required to follow the most stringent requirements.
Okay, so there you go. The CCC is not more stringent than state licensure. They have been led to believe that it is, but it is not. And if you go to the state of Nevada, or I don't know, any state where Medicaid still requires the Cs for SLPs to participate in that, if I were doing this, I would go line by line through what the licensure requirements are in that state and what the CCC requirements are, and demonstrate that the Cs are not more stringent. They are simply a duplicate, and the state is requiring providers to buy a proprietary certificate when the license is an equivalent document.
I mean, it almost seems like an efficient approach could be to go to departments of ed and be like, you need to require a license, or go to this. I mean, I don't know who controls, like,
don't
are
know.
schools
And-
just in their own little world with
You
regulation?
know, if you
No, there's departments, like in Ohio,
ASHA's
there's
website has every state requirement. I just was on there today looking.
not
I
always
just don't
up to date.
understand how you can work as an SLP without being licensed. Like, how is that even legal?
You can. Because
But-
they're teachers.
Yeah,
Because they're teachers.
like in Pennsylvania, they
But they're
have
not teachers.
they are in the
called
state of
teachers.
Pennsylvania. They have it. So in Pennsylvania, you have to take extra classes. Like, remember, we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
even I could never get licensed as an SLP working in the schools in PA unless I take like 3 additional courses.
In education.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So schools in Pennsylvania, as part of their programs, automatically like prep, that's part of their coursework as undergrads, is they have to take those courses. So when they leave school, when they graduate, they're prepared to get that
Oh,
that
yeah.
license, that teaching
me just, like,
certificate.
And frankly, if you tried, a lot of people become SLPs not because they want to work in clinical settings, working in hospital settings with all of the swallowing and dysphagia and all that. They become SLPs because they want to work in the public schools. They don't want to be teachers, but they want that teacher setting, schedule, salary thing. They want that. So you have to sort of be careful what you're messing with here, because in a lot of instances, public school SLPs have used those C's to their advantage. It's gotten them things. I'll give you one example. Years ago, I don't know if this still exists, but there used to be this thing called master teacher. And teachers in the public school could take on extra coursework. They had to create an actual portfolio to show, they had to be observed, and they created this portfolio, and they became something called a master teacher. And what that got them was a boost in salary and a boost in their place on the spectrum of things in the public schools. ASHA went to those departments of education in those states where that master teacher thing was, and convinced them that somebody who got a master's degree in SLP and then got the C's was the same thing as these teachers who had gone through this years-long process of preparing this portfolio, getting all this extra education. And so SLPs then were able to use those C's to get that same boost. ASHA has used an inflated definition, and they've been very successful at it, to make people think that CCC is something that it is not.
And that standard has changed a little bit. It's now like master's plus 30, master's plus 45. And there's no, to my knowledge, at least in Ohio, there's no portfolio or anything like that. If you complete the coursework, you get the raise. And so most teachers, to my knowledge, and I'm sure we'll get emails and angry comments if I'm wrong, if you've completed your master's degree, a lot of times we have the plus 30 already, or we're awfully close.
Right.
So yeah, that's how they sort of do it now. It's not a master's teacher. It's like a plus 30, plus 45, plus 60, whatever.
Right, but I mean, I've heard people say that, like, if teachers get board certified, then the CCC is equivalent. I think that's still happening.
Yes,
today.
that's still a thing that lots of schools are negotiating for an additional stipend. And we've seen some really high numbers. I think one person told us they get $9,000 a year or something, what Megan and I have continued to say is that we tell these people, you're someone who needs to keep your CCC. Like there are people who should keep it and who can make that choice. The point of this movement, this platform, is that people have the choice. So if I'm making $9,000 a year with my CCC stipend, I choose to keep it. But if Megan's not, she should have the right to not have to pay for the CCC. And that's what we want to see.
Probably nobody would object to ASHA selling a continuing education certificate if they simply called it what it was. I would have stayed a member. I would have been a member because I get information from, I just got a good website. There's information there. I worked with hearing impaired people. Many children had speech language difficulties. I wanted to keep informed. I didn't want to buy that certificate. I didn't need it. I didn't want it. And the notion that the only person that can supervise somebody who's buying that certificate is ridiculous and insulting. So but they won't do that. And that's what they should do. Let's say they charged everybody who wants to quote unquote maintain their Cs, that CE registry, $50 a year. They've got 200,000 members. You know how much $200,000 times $50? They could still make a fortune from doing nothing more than being a registry for your CE hours that you could then use for your license to say, see, I completed the CE requirements or
Yep.
equivalent to the state requirements. $50 a year. I'd pay for that.
Well, and based on their financial report, we calculated that it should cost them around $8 to $12 a year, just in what it costs them, according to them, to run their certification program. That's what it should
Okay.
actually cost
So
us.
$50 a year, pay them that. You know, it's not the $250 a year is nothing for membership. And I saw your chart today that said it's not the $250. It's that they're lying about what it is. They're not
Yeah.
calling it what it is. They might have a useful product. That certificate is a useful product. They should sell it as that, a useful product. They should not pretend that it is anything more than what it is. And certainly for audiologists, it's ridiculous that audiologists have doctorates. Anybody with a master's degree who graduates from a program accredited by ASHA, by definition, has completed an academic program that contains all of those standards. And then they get that CFY year, which is 9 months. It's still 9 months. It's 9 months because that's what the public schools are, 9 months. That's why it's 9 months, not a year. It's not a CFY, it's a CF 9 months. All geared to the public schools. So
Yeah.
take a look, I would say, at challenging Medicaid laws, not suing.
Yeah, can I just, and I know Jeanette wants to talk about it, but like, just so I'm clear and everyone listening is clear, when you're hired by a school district as a psychologist, you're hired as a licensed psychologist. When you're hired by a school district as an occupational therapist, you're hired as a licensed occupational therapist. When you're hired by a school district as a speech pathologist, you're hired as a teacher.
Sometimes. Some states require the license.
Okay. So we need to dig into that and figure
Like
out
in
who does
Ohio,
what.
there's a different type of license for a speech language pathologist. I can't think of the name right now because I hung on to it. Yeah, I deeply relate to this. I hung on to it for years and years after I stopped working in the schools because I was afraid to let it lapse, because I was afraid to like what I would have to do to get it back. Even though I started going to school to get a PhD focusing on dysphagia and dementia, I'm still paying for the school teaching certificate just in case. But somewhere in there they did change it, and I can't remember what it is, but
You know, and you understand that when you get a master's degree, you do not get a master's degree in speech language pathology. You get a master's degree in a discipline, communication disorders and whatever the hell it's called.
speech and hearing science.
Speech and hearing science. It's not, whereas when an OT gets a master's degree, they get a master's degree in occupational therapy, a master's degree in physical therapy. Physicians get a doctor of medicine degree. You don't get a doctor of speech language pathology degree. You get a doctor of some science, unless you're in I don't know if they're professional programs, but it is all because of our origins in academic programs. We came out of drama, speech and drama programs.
Yep.
Communication. We came out of an academic place.
This is my master's degree that just happened to be hanging out on the table, and
Okay.
it just says Master of Arts. It doesn't even say speech.
Speech language pathology.
There's nothing about speech on
Because
here.
they can't, that academic program cannot qualify you or call you a speech
Wow.
language pathologist. Your practical training, they have no responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And it's
I'm
all
pretty sure my PhD said something different, but that's in a different room. I just had that out for a different reason.
I'm
I
just
had to go pick it
realizing,
up.
I don't even know what my degree was in. I don't even know.
Master of Arts or
Why isn't it framed, hanging on your wall with your certificate
I
of
think
clinical
master's degrees are
competency?
MED, Master of Education, MS, Master of Science, MA, Master of Arts. PhDs, usually it's not going to say speech language pathology.
I'm about to go
PhD in
find
audiology
it.
don't say that. They say PhD in, they don't say PhD in audiology. AUD is audiology, but PhD, no. You're getting PhD in a discipline. Acoustics,
So-
acoustic science, something. Not in
So-
audio.
Audiologists have made huge strides in ensuring that entry-level competency is in place without the CCC or the CFY. And in fact, like we're about to post information on this, like so do OT, so does PT. Like it's asinine to me that we hold on to the Cs as some sort of like competency regulatory
But the major
standard.
difference is that the academic programs in audiology, in PT, and in OT, they are professional schools. So
Yeah.
the clinical requirements, the practicum requirements are
Yes.
included in the degree program itself. And the academic program, the professional school program, is responsible for them.
So we have another episode called Practice Analysis Paralysis, where we talk about the practice analysis and like all of the research that goes into setting the standards. And the way that ASHA has written that practice analysis is they set it up so that you only can learn a certain amount in grad school, and then most of it is learned after you leave grad school. And so when they're saying that the CCC is evidence-based, they're saying that it's based on this practice analysis survey, and the way the survey is written is designed to keep the CCC alive and well, like until that analysis or that survey changes.
Truth, if you added the necessity to obtain all of those practicum hours within the master's degree program, people would be paying for, I mean, how many credit hours now is it to get a master's
Right.
degree? Now you add the more practicum hours, the school would be charging you tuition for those hours. So the cost of a master's degree would be enormous. The way it is set up now, your academic program is finished with you after 2 years. They don't have to worry about where you get. And ASHA has set it up so that it's the professional responsibility of people
Yeah.
practicing speech language
Yeah.
pathologists to provide primary education for nothing.
We call that the MLM, the SLP multi-level marketing scheme.
Yeah.
I have my PhD here now, and there's a lot more words on the degree, but it says that I did all these things, satisfactory completion of the course prescribed in the graduate school, and it's a degree of Doctor of Philosophy. There's no,
That's right.
I mean, I could go out and say I did
Academic
some
degree.
other kind of work and just show them this degree, and no one would know the difference.
So your
Unless
professional
they read my dissertation.
professional status is not defined by your degree because it's from an academic program. They were not responsible for any practicum you did.
Well, this was a PhD, so you don't do practicum.
Well, in a professional degree, you do.
Yeah. No, this is a
Well, and-
Doctor of Philosophy.
And this is a good point to say, like the SLPD program, those programs are not part of the CAA. ASHA has nothing
Yeah.
to do with regulating SLPD
Yeah.
programs. Those are regulated by the Department of Education. How the hell did that happen? Like, how is our profession just like being scattered to the wind? And like whoever wants to come regulate, just join the club, join the line, get in line.
Free
so that
money.
we can all pay you. Yeah. Like,
Free money.
what?
Get in. Let's do a
But
fixed SLP
it's
degree
your
with our
master's
ACE award.
degree- Your master's degree programs are accredited by ASHA.
Yeah.
And CAA, and you should take, I mean, I have some testimony before the Department of Education about the CAA, because the CAA used to require
Let's
as a
talk about
condition
this.
of accreditation that the Cs had to be that the Cs
They
had.
did? That
Oh,
used to be a thing?
Yeah, we went
Somebody-
in hours and hours of testimony, and the Department of Education told ASHA they had to stop, which is when this whole business came about that, oh yes, you have to have a supervisor who has the Cs only for students who wish to get their Cs. You can go get a supervisor without Cs if you want to, but you can't count those hours towards getting your Cs because those people aren't qualified. In my
This
private
is why.
Oh, yeah. That's
So-
so the Department of Education told the CAA that they could no longer use that requirement
Oh
as
my
a
God. Okay.
condition for
So
accreditation.
for people who are like,
But-
we need to fix ASHA from within, this is why we need an external force keeping ASHA accountable because they're pulling stuff like this. Sorry.
But also, so now, yes, okay, first of all, I have two things to say about that. Recently, because I am the social media monitor, somebody actually said some programs require the CCC before you get your degree. That might be someone who's older, maybe, because we have a lot of people who state things as fact that don't actually know the facts. So it sounds like if you're listening and that's actually happening, let us know we have a problem. That statement could
I
have
know
been,
for a fact that some people, I believe the University of Maryland requires the Cs as a condition of graduation. Those
still,
people get their Cs before they graduate. They take the praxis before they graduate. It's a requirement. And they weren't going to graduate. Now
They
that
they have to do their CFY and then they graduate.
no, they have to in
They have to get
the
their CF.
program in the Doctor of Audiology program at the University of Maryland, I believe.
Oh, the audiology. Okay.
This is one example. In order to get the degree, they had to get their Cs. It was a requirement of graduation, which I thought, how can a state university have a requirement for a student to have to purchase a proprietary certificate in order to graduate from that program?
let's play conspiracy theorist. Maryland, University of Maryland. Where's the ASHA office?
I do
Maryland?
believe that there are some programs that require it of their graduates. Most programs tell their graduates that it's critical that they get their Cs.
Yes.
There are some programs that don't do that, but
And
most programs,
so, yes. And so then the second part of this is, because we've been saying this all along, and I don't think people are quite hearing it, because we get a lot of questions about having your Cs to supervise. This is not what you just heard her say. This requirement is not an ASHA or a CAA requirement that you have to have your CCC to supervise. This is a requirement of the program. The program has written into their accreditation program.
what they've written into their program is that if you want your Cs, you have to be supervised by somebody with their Cs. That's written in the program.
Right. But so I've talked recently in the past couple weeks, I've talked to a couple people in academia specifically that there is this box that says you have prepared your students for licensure and national certification and all these things, and you just check it. But in terms of what they submit to the CAA to be accredited and maintain accreditation, they have to have a plan on how they're going to do that. And some universities write in that plan that their supervisors must have the CCC. Because one person I said, that I talked to said, well, if we ever changed that we'd have to go up for reaccreditation. And that's a whole thing. And another person told me, well, if you succeed with this is going to close programs. And I'm thinking, why would it close programs? If they have it written into their policy, then take the time and change it. Don't put the burden on
Because
practicing
ASHA
speech
never
pathologists.
really informed its academic programs that they
No.
accredited that they didn't have to have that requirement anymore.
Right.
And
They just
still
let
use-
these rumors perpetuate, and then they make practicing clinicians who are underpaid and overworked and who are caring and in this profession because they are nice and want to help people. they make us feel like it's our responsibility to uphold this freaking system that like all the university has to do is change their policy.
Correct.
Have a staff meeting. You don't even have to go up against a board. I mean, now, in terms of like, yes, this isn't even coursework where you have to like get it approved by your like, at a university, there's typically a committee that you have to, a curriculum committee. This isn't curriculum, but it might take somebody high, like another committee higher in the university, just who's checks and balances or whatever. But if the department is coming forward with a plan that makes sense, they're presenting to like math colleagues and English colleagues, you know, even if there's somebody else who needs to look at this, they don't understand. Give them the well thought out plan and why we're putting in for this change, and people will say yes, because
Okay.
no one wants to sit in those meetings anyway. No one's trying to fight it at the university level.
Only change that you're asking for is that in order to be certified, you have to be, in order to be supervised, you have to be supervised by a licensed professional.
Yes, that's it.
That's
That's
all.
it.
And,
And so it's
ASHA
not that hard.
and ASHA could not use that as a reason to deny accreditation.
And I have another suggestion there. If universities have written that very thing, like you have to have a CCC, then ASHA should just say, anyone who is making change to that statement alone, you can't make any other changes, but anyone who wants to change from CCC, a supervisor who holds the CCC, to licensed clinician, if you want to change that verbiage, we will give you a grace period of 2 years to do that without having to go up for reaccreditation or
It-
whatever.
it's not a reason to go for reaccreditation. That is
But
not.
that's what PhDs think. So unless they're gonna educate, you know, these are the things that at least the
ASHA's not gonna
PhDs
do, they're not
No.
gonna change anything.
No, but at least the PhDs who are at least engaging with us, and thank you if you're listening, because we appreciate these like really great conversations. These are the things they're saying. These are the things they're afraid of.
Well,
Programs closing, reaccreditation. How will we ever get our students through the program? These are the fears of academic SLPs. And who in God's name will
But
run this profession?
So, I mean, that goes back to the original sort of conversation of like academic SLPs are feeling the weight of having to fully prepare SLPs. But what we're saying in this conversation is that's not how the system is set up. So why do they feel so much responsibility for that? They shouldn't. But I understand we're not going to change people's minds. It's just a
Ivory
broken
tower.
system.
I mean, the
mentality,
academic
opinion.
program, you do have a certain number of hours of practicum that have to be completed
400.
within 400.
And the 25 of that is just guided supervision. So like that's done at undergrad, and then the one-on-one is 375.
Still, 375 is all the academic program is responsible for. And they are telling students that those 375 must be obtained from a person with the Cs. Not true.
In the event that they eventually want, like, I think
No, they're
universities
not
don't want to
saying
be.
In the
I
event.
know, I understand that, but I think they're doing that because they don't want to be sued. They don't want to misconstrue what they're
Yes.
selling. And
But they are also, they go further than that. They say, you have to use a supervisor who's got the Cs if you want to apply for your Cs. And if you don't get your Cs, you're not going to be able to get licensed if you move from state. You'll have terrible trouble you won't be able to get
All
a
the
job
fear.
if you don't have your Cs and all of that business. So they use the and argument for pushing people to purchase and to bolster this financial bullying that ASHA has done for 100 years, 75 years, 80 years, however long they've been around. It's a long time.
yeah, they're
So-
about to turn 100 this year, next year.
So
So you have done a lot of work. You've gone and testified many times. You have been called forth by the ASHA Ethics Board for when you were a member of ASHA, but you were
What I
not
did
holding the Cs.
was when I sent in my dues, what I did was I paid them just to be a member. And I said I didn't want my Cs anymore. So I did that. And then I was, I was an ASHA member without Cs. And I was still responding on boards, I was responding, and somebody reported me. They said, Angela Lovenbrook is a practicing audiologist who does not have her Cs. She's a member of ASHA, but she doesn't have her Cs, and you're not permitted to do that. So that I got a letter from the Ethical Practice Board at the time saying you have violated the Code of Ethics. I hired a lawyer. I went and had a hearing before the ASHA Ethical Practice Board where I said to them, I have done nothing unethical. I maintain the highest standards of ethics. What I have simply done is to not pay you for your certificate. I continue to get continuing education credits. I have proof of that. I have done nothing unethical. Tell me what I've done that's unethical. And so they went away. And then the next thing I knew is I got a letter from them saying, oh, it was a mistake. We never should have let you join because you don't meet the criteria for being a member only. The criteria for being member only status in ASHA is that you may not be a practicing audiologist. I was a practicing audiologist, therefore I could not only be a member.
And that
Yeah.
was their response.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who are afraid of ASHA?
I would say that ASHA only has a hold on us because we continue to give them that status, and that people en masse started to say to ASHA, I don't want to buy your certificate. That certificate's too expensive. I want to be a member, but I don't want to buy your certificate. Then ASHA would have to change its structure. I would also, state organizations are really important here because many of these regulations are on the state level, and state organizations have to challenge them. And the other thing is that we all have to be bolstering licensure laws to make sure we have the strongest possible licensure laws. I mean, my argument is if you want to tell me that there's a certificate that has a higher standard than licensure because somehow those are important qualifications for a practitioner, then I would say everybody deserves practitioners who have those qualifications. If it's important, then it should be part of the licensure law because everybody deserves to have the highest qualified provider, not just some few. So ASHA's got to change its structure. It's got to start calling that CCC what it is, continuing education certificate, sell it as that, and then change their membership structure. That's what they need to do.
They could even have two certificates because the CCC is a one-time training milestone. It indicates that you've done all these things, X, Y, Z.
Right.
Boom, done. You pay for that, you get it. And then they could sell another. They could have multiple certification products if they want to
Correct.
sell a continuing education certification.
If you want Girl Scout badges for getting the most, CE credits, if that's important to you, then you can do that. If that gets you something in your workplace, then you can buy that. But everybody shouldn't have to. And the licensure should be the standard. That should be stringent.
That's what we should spend our energy on.
Yeah, that should separate it. And, I think that some things have changed since I was a young person like you. My training in my master's degree and my doctoral training, the responsibility to be part of a professional organization, to give your time, both on the state level and on the national level, that was part and parcel. We knew that was as much of our responsibility as anything we were ever going to do for patients. And we did. And I don't think that that's true now. I tried to start an audiology organization in New York State because New York State doesn't have a New York Academy of Audiology. It has the New York State Speech Language Hearing Association, which I was president of for 2 terms. They represent both speech language pathologists and audiologists. Licensure boards are licensure boards for speech language pathology and audiology, in spite of the fact that they're 2 separate professions.
Yep.
It's like having a licensure board that licenses both physical therapists and physicians, chiropractors. It doesn't. So, you can't get people to volunteer, can't give people to give their time. And I think that the notion of the importance of individual efforts on the state level is critical. And then on the national level, for unsexy things, writing standards, it's not fun. Writing codes of ethics, not a lot of fun, but critical to the profession. So that would be my advice.
One challenge that we're seeing, even through our efforts, is that some of these state organizations are run by people in academia who are and these are quotes that we have received because we invited every state to come on our podcast for the state by state series, which has been a huge hit. People like hearing about their state. We've gotten some feedback that from one state in particular, that as soon as their episode aired, their requests for membership skyrocketed. They reached out to us. We didn't even follow up to ask that question. They told us. But some of these states that have either formally declined or who just ignore us, we've heard from people on those exec boards, we were told to toe the ASHA line, or we don't want to throw ASHA under the bus. Michigan is trying, there's a group in Michigan right now trying to change the Medicaid regulation to get the CCC out of it. And they sent letters to their state association, and that association said, we're not doing this. Yeah. We're gonna go with our own agenda, pretty much is what they said back. And that's ludicrous. You're supposed to be serving the members of your state, whether if you're in academia, fine. You get accolades and raises and tenure and promotions and all of these things for serving on those committees. But if you are serving, you need to serve the members, not serve your own agenda.
Their members don't have any idea.
Yeah. But like in Michigan, they have an idea. They're asking, can we partner with you to work on this? No. No. That was the answer. No.
Why is it that we feel like if we're questioning something with ASHA that we're throwing them under the bus? Like, why is that?
Well, that's always been it's called ASHA bashing. It's not allowed. So I think they have to be taking notice. I think that you have to keep informing speech language pathologists what this means to them. And then, I mean, do take a look at this. So that's the SOC codes. I think that'll give you some more information. And I think partnering with state associations is a really important thing because a lot of regs come there. Be another example, to get a job in a hospital. Hospitals will tell SLPs and audiologists they have to have their Cs because it's a requirement of JCAH, the Joint Commission on.
It's not. We looked it up. We got
neither,
that.
It's not required of CARF either.
Our fearless fixers are all over it.
And it's because it's been presented to the hospitals as if that is the equivalent of board certification.
Or how about this? Megan, I haven't even told you about this one yet. I recently took a job with a home health company who had no idea what the CCC was. I was so proud of them and praised them. But when I was signing the paperwork this week, I was going through the job description and it didn't even say you had to have the CCC. It said ASHA membership preferred. And I was like, I looked at the HR lady. I'm like, I was like, what is this? And she's like, I don't really know. And I was like, well, it's in your paperwork. And so she looked at it because it was all electronic. And she's like, oh, that probably came straight from CHAP. So CHAP is the accrediting body that they use. And so she's like, that is probably the job description that we're using from CHAP. So with CHAP, they don't care if you have your CCC. They just prefer membership. Well, you can't be a member without the CCC. So yeah, I was like, well, at least it says preferred. I said we'd have to discuss this if it was required.
Yeah. And so, but that, it's a strategy. It was a strategy that was a decision at an executive board meeting of ASHA to do exactly what they've done with the Cs, to make them required in as many places as they could, and to kind of distort their budget process so that it looks like everything they do is that certificate work.
I'm
every other
still
organization.
holding my one question inside about lawsuits and the CCC. So what about these companies? Like in the state of Ohio, the CCC is not required for anything. We're pretty free here. Other than employers requiring it, do you think that can be challenged legally if they're not paying for it? Or is it because they're private companies, they can require whatever they want?
I think a lot of times they're requiring it because they don't understand even what they're requiring. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I
This is
don't.
why we need sustainability or sustaining partners,
Yeah.
people. Come on in.
I
We
think
need
that,
a firm.
to be a discriminatory or trying to think.
Oh, I like that word though. That's a good word.
Discriminatory. It's discriminatory for no reason whatsoever, because it has nothing to do with the competencies required for the position.
So can I ask, I mean, you've been at this audiologists have been fighting ASHA for.
I had black hair when I started working on it.
So like Jeanette and I have talked a lot about how do we want to move forward. And I know audiologists move forward by creating an alternative membership association. And that's one tactic. And the way that Jeanette and I are approaching this is different in that we want to create this advocacy firm, and we want to be supported by very small monthly donations from sustaining partners, because there needs to be a counteracting force to keep ASHA accountable. Given like how you've seen things evolve and unfold with audiology, do you have any advice for us as we move forward and try to build something that is that force?
I think starting a new organization is an enormous task, and just an enormous task. I think that speech pathologists, I think, have a better chance of getting change from within than audiologists did, because we were such a small group that they didn't care what we wanted. They were mostly concerned about their SLP membership, as they should be. It's 90%, 95% of their membership. But you want to start getting people elected to the board who run on a campaign that says they want to change the CCC. You want to start getting people to do that.
But the problem is that they've changed the election policies, so it's done through a committee. And you have to be vetted, and there's no way that that any of us would survive the vetting process.
Could you imagine if Megan or Jeanette were put forth as a person? They already know us by name. They'd be like, no, that we don't even need to let them know. They would say no.
Yeah,
we would never be able to go up for, we would never be able to be elected.
But others who
I think
share,
it would be I don't know what their vetting process is, but I imagine it has something to do with.
Have to get people. I think you're going to have to keep challenging them. Every regulation that you find that requires those Cs, you need to challenge. And you can do state by state. On the federal level, you can do that. Just start asking questions, start pushing, and getting people to do that. State licensure boards, that's another place where you can go, because you have to loosen the hold that ASHA has had on getting the name of that certificate embedded in dozens of places as if it's something other than what it is. And the other thing would be to get universities to understand that they are denying their students supervisors who are perfectly qualified supervisors who choose not to purchase that certificate. So, that was more successful in audiology. That was more easily successful in audiology because a lot of private practices, I had a premier private practice, and people were told they couldn't come to my office to do their practicum because nobody in my office had the Cs, and we wouldn't play the game. There was just no way of playing the game.
Yeah, so students miss out.
Right.
So another word they could use is like denying access to quality education outside of the classroom.
Correct. The quality supervision outside of the classroom. And kind of documenting that they were told, no, they couldn't go to that place because that person didn't have their Cs.
What else, I mean, as we kind of wrap this up, like what else have you noticed as far as the shift in culture at ASHA or the shift in culture of its membership base? Like, what have you seen evolve recently, and what are you hopeful for in the future?
I haven't watched speech language pathology. I mean, I really am not, so I'm only audiology. And I think that among audiologists, there are still a bunch. There are people who buy that certificate who have nothing else to do with ASHA. They don't go to their conventions. They don't do anything. But there's still a group of audiologists who are kind of go along to, just go along with it. It's not a big deal. It's $200 and some a year. Just go along with it. It makes life easier. Don't challenge it. To me, it's a matter of principle. And if there's such a thing as ethical behavior by a professional association, just as there's ethical behavior by practitioners, what ASHA is doing is unethical. It's unethical. It's dishonest. And I don't think that our professional organizations should run themselves unethically while insisting that there are codes of ethics that we as practitioners need to follow. So it's more of a matter of principle to me. I always say, before I die, I want that certificate to die. I just want it, or at least I want there to be honesty about it. And so far, that's not been true. So
We're 5 months closer with Fix SLP. We're
I
5
have
months closer.
I have great hope. I was very excited to see what you guys are doing and that there's truth telling, and I'm impressed by the data you've gathered. So keep up the good work. Anything I can do to be helpful, I will. Keep going.
I have a question. Hopefully you're comfortable sharing this. Do you have grandkids?
6 of them.
What do they call you?
Mima.
Okay, so you are the Mima fixer. We've got Big Daddy Asha, we've got Mima fixer. Like, that is who you are.
Yes.
I'm so impressed. I'm so
Thank
happy
you.
that
I've been-
Dr. Whitelaw introduced us.
I mean, when I saw that stuff, I have written to every audiologist I know, all my old, and I'll tell you, there are some folks, I won't say it out loud, but I'll text you. There are some other audiologists who were part of, certainly just as active as I in the work that AAA has done, that I think have useful information to you about academia and about some of the particular challenges there that you ought to talk to. So I'll send you that information privately. I mean, I certainly have not been alone here. There are people who came long before me and who have done incredible work in getting audiologists to understand their status as autonomous practitioners.
Thank you for all the work that you've done.
You're very welcome.
Inspiring all of us.
Go get them.
We're trying. We're trying. I think we're
All right.
so far so good. So far so good. Okay, I'm just gonna wrap up real quick. If you love what we're doing, we do not have a Patreon like you're used to hearing. We have something called a sustaining partnership. We ask that people just throw us $5 a month. You can find out more information about that at fixslp.com. I have got a review. This one is from Runnin' Jess. She said, I can't thank Megan and Jeanette enough for this podcast and movement. They take the time to research issues on our behalf and give clear pathways on how to advocate for ourselves. From podcast to social media, the information you will receive is so valuable. Asha better sleep with one eye open. These amazing professionals know how to find answers, and they bring the documentation and proof. It will take all of us to solve the big national issues. They give us a way to embrace our autonomy and help move in the right direction. Thank you for helping all of us get clear on our vision. You are welcome, Runnin' Jess. I randomly chose that. That was gorgeous. Thank you. Okay, so if no one has anything else, everyone's good, Megan?
Yep.
And we're just going to tell everybody thanks for fixing it, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.